All right, let's get this rolling. Reset my timer. All right, folks, welcome to this kind of pre-recorded version of the Start Streaming Pinball seminar that you will see at the Golden State Pinball Festival 2024. My name is Michael Mattsson. I'm also known as DRI374. I'm a bit of a broadcasting enthusiast, and I stream pinball and arcade games on Twitch at DRI374. And some of you might know me from having a garage full of pinball machines and running pinball streams for the last 4 years. I've kind of started out with this setup here, very DIY. I did not have any equipment kind of dedicated to pinball streaming when I started. I used this frame from an old green screen I had for my office here, and just basically took what I had. Like I had my work laptop, I had my microphone that I have right here, and I on a USB cam and whatnot. And at the end of the day, it's just since then it's kind of just piled on, right? So this is basically what the setup looks like today. It's a little bit more advanced, and hopefully I will be able to give you a few hints on how to build something like this, depending on what you want to do, right? So if you want to just stream and record a few of your home games, or if you want to do tournament streaming, at least this will do. Give you a little bit of a base plate, right? We're not going to talk about tournament streaming today, but at least give you an idea, right? And I've also helped others to get started with this as well, right? So I built the rig down at Lynn's. I helped a few folks online to kind of get started with this, and I'll share a link at the end where you can find a thread on Tilt forums where all the tech around pinball streaming is being talked about. So I will basically give you a recipe to drain all your spare time. I divided the presentation into two kind of sections, right? First, we're going to talk about all the little hardware and kind of like gear, like cameras, mics, and all that, to give you an idea of what kind of equipment you need. And then we go into the software stuff later on, right? And talk a little bit about internet bandwidth, video encoding, and stuff like that. Kind of details that you kind of need to have a hunch about how it works and why it works like it does. There's going to be a QA at the end, but since this is a pre-recorded version, just fire off the questions down below, and we should be good to go. So if you look at the anatomy of a pinball stream, you obviously have a game, and this is my latest game. It's coming in soon. You have a bunch of players. You want to capture them playing the game. Obviously, the most important aspect of the game is the play field. You want to capture the score. You want to grab the audio from the game somehow. And you might want to capture other game elements, right? An example could be that I have on my Alien, I used to have like a camera kind of pointed at a xenomorph, because it's kind of like a cool thing when the xenomorph kind of grabs the ball and stuff like that, right? And you can maybe have like a spinner or something some other detail on the play field that you capture separately and kind of put in the overlay to kind of create a cool effect. And then you also have the live online interaction and the and some of the elements that you can kind of grab from some of the services out there. It can be, you can incorporate like the Twitch chat, or you can have subscriber notifications and stuff like that. And depending on how you want to interact with your audience, you can kind of incorporate that into the stream as well, right? And this kind of constitutes some sort of output. And what we're going to talk about today is basically how you capture all these things and put it into a stream. I also want to kind of talk a little bit about this picture here. This is Slayer. This is Tom Araya, and this is basically how it's the closer you are to kind of giving yourself an idea of what you're actually capturing. If you have this in the back of your mind, the better it will become, right? Because it is a very noisy and loud environment, and it has a lot of dynamic lighting, and you also have to think a lot about since this picture is like a perfect kind of rock concert picture, right? You got to think about the framing and the composition and the timing, right? You see like everything is kind of like taking the picture at right moment when the fire kind of shoots out, right? Another important detail, you might not be able to see it because the resolution is so low, is that there's actually one of these Marshall amps, Marshall stacks, right? Most of these boxes are empty, but it's always one that is live, that is basically the musician's instrument, is mic'd up with a traditional mic. You just plug it in front of the speaker, and that is basically the audio that you're hearing, right? And has anyone been to a Slayer concert where it sounds bad? Probably not, right? And this is how you should think about capturing audio from a pinball machine as well. So if we start at kind of like the basic stands and tripods and the contraptions to kind of get things kind of hung in and in position, in the right position. There are a lot of ways you can start doing this, right? And one of the popular kind of DIY solutions is to take an old coat rack and kind of just like cut off the edges and make it into a frame that kind of fits over the machine, right? But I want to talk about this solution, which is a very cost-effective DIY solution, and this is furniture-grade PVC pipes, and it's basically $50 worth of material here. And this comes from one of my colleagues at my day job, and he sent me this picture, and he's just like, yeah, that's just brilliant because this costs nothing, and if you just want to record some gameplay in your home arcade, this is perfect, right? And if you go into kind of like the stage 2, it's hot fun, you kind of think like, yeah, this is really cool. Then you might want to start thinking about hanging in more stuff, making the rig kind of transportable. You want to put wheels on it. And that's kind of when you come in with a solution of having like a bunch of tripods and you have a bunch of mic stands. And what you see here in this picture is actually something called a C stand, right? So it's from a brand called Matthews. And this is made mostly for the movie industry to kind of hold lights and other kind of contraptions that you need in filmmaking, right? So they could be you can use it for mic booms and all sorts, right? And they are super sturdy, right? They're so heavy, and you can just hang as much gear you want them in, basically, right? And this is the lighter version of my C stand that I had, right? But I still have like laptop batteries. I have 3 cameras and I think there's like 2 lights on it, and it didn't even break a sweat, right? And also I had a microphone there as well, as you can see right here. But if you kind of want to do the whole full send commitment, there is a type of material that we now build all our pinball streaming rigs with. It's called the 1550 T-slot profile. There's 2 companies that I know of where you can buy this material, and it's from 8020.net and T-Nuts. I should probably put the links in the presentation there, and this allows you to kind of build everything exactly to spec, right? And it have like really clever mounts, how you can attach profile. You can make this very portable. You can fit it into a carry-on if you travel with it, and it's very flexible to build from. And you can also build other. You just don't have to do the traditional frame. You can add like extensions and stuff like that. And it's just so easy to work with to attach stuff to. and this is sort of like the way I usually mount stuff onto this frame, right? So I also usually have the overhead playfield camera. I have a separate arm that is kind of slotted into the T-slot, and then I use something called crab clamps to kind of nip into the profile. They fit perfectly, and those little arms that you see that are kind of where the cameras are attached to, and to the crab clamps here, they're called magic arms, right? And you can get them in 2 different lengths depending on how far out from the frame you want stuff, and that is a very flexible solution, because there's nothing you can't mount on these, because they're super sturdy, and the only thing I have the playfield camera fixed is because there is a little bit of leeway when you kind of clamp this thing to the T-slot, the crab clamp there, while this gives you a permanent mount. But that comes from the same company that sells the frame. You can just go into their accessories and you'll find the block there. Another thing that you can kind of observe in this picture as well is the cabling here, right? So every like frame I build, you have like a dedicated harness, so nothing is kind of wired individually. So what happens is that I build the harness, and that harness is just one thing, right? So you just like bolt it on. There are like these little black things you can see here. You kind of twist them into the frame, right? So it just like it almost like sticks on to the frame, right? So it's very easy to stand it up and tear it down. If you're building like a permanent rig for your home arcade, yeah, like it doesn't matter, just like wire it however you want. But if you want to have a portable rig that you want to be able to build up and tear down fairly quickly, that's something that you need to think about as well. All right, so let's talk about lights. And was this actually the right slide? Yeah, that was the right slide. Yeah, so why is it loading so slow? All right, doesn't matter. All right, so the lights or the lack of, right? And a lot of like comments I get is just like, oh, your stream looks great, what cameras you're using, and I can read what it says on the play field. And most of this is actually thanks to good lighting, right? And just for shits and giggles, basically, I just went on Twitch on that day. I put together that slide. All right, let's see who's streaming, right? And this is not an uncommon scene out there, right? There are all these people that have gone through all the efforts of like being able to get their tournament streamed. One of these was, I think both of these were actually tournament streams, and there's like no extra lighting at all, right? And it just, for me, for somebody who actually thinks about this a lot, this gives me a little bit of an ick, to be honest, right? So we want to be able to put good lights both on the play field and on the talent, right? And the three main concerns that you kind of need to figure out here is first, like if you can use anti-reflective glass, that's the absolute best. Not everyone has access to that. Like they come standard with the LEs and the Jersey Jacks and stuff like that. But you can buy glass to any game except the old wide bodies to remove all the glare from the play field. Another thing you can do, like if you're streaming Spike 2 Sterns, is just that you can turn down the back box lighting when you're playing the game, right? And that removes so much glare on the top of the game, right? So a few other things here, yeah. So thinking about glare and reflection is that when you put lights around the play field and on the talent, is that you can't distract the player with either creating reflections in the play field or creating reflections for the stream as well, right? Because that's very common. So I'm going to show you a little bit about the positioning later, but you can see like the play field light is right here, and another important detail is that when you want to keep the light off the display, right? So here you can see that like around the display here, it's just completely pitch black. And that is because there's no light flooding the back box at all, right? And that means that the camera can focus on actually capturing display. So you get the really good colors, really good contrast when you keep lights off the back box. You can also see like another important aspect that I kind of try to figure out is like how do you like get good skin tones on the talent, right? Because if the player kind of looks half dead or like pitch black, it's just all of a sudden what happens is like all the codecs that you actually compress the video will make it look even worse, right? So once you get like really good skin tones and really natural looking person, all of a sudden the codecs are doing a really good job and all of a sudden everything looks so much better, right? So there's two positioning options you have basically, and one is this option here. I run with this in my home arcade because I'm just playing myself. It doesn't really matter, and that is that you hang the lights like really far up and away from everything, right? Away from the play field, away from cameras, away from the player, and it doesn't distract at all, right? But if you want to play, if you would want to play NBA Fast Break here or Monster Bash, you would have to like, oh, where's the glare, right? And it's very impractical if you're in a shared environment such as an arcade, right? And that's kind of where I built this solution for full lens, and at the end of the day, this is what I call my gold standard now, right? So you have a play field camera really low on one of the sides, right? And you build like hoods out of ABS plastics and Velcro that will basically funnel the light where you want the light, so you don't want light on the game next to you. You don't want it light distracting the player, and you don't want any light on the back box either. And then the same thing with the player camera or the player light is that you build a very long funnel, like the barn door with that plastic, so it's very far back, and what happens is that you don't create any reflection on the play field when you have such a long sleeves coming out from the bottom, so you can kind of move the light into the frame, and therefore you're not distracting any player on either side of this player, because the light is only being funneled straight onto the talent that is playing that particular game, right? So, and I have links at the end to like all the materials and all that good stuff that you can kind of build your own of these, and it's very simple. It's just like Velcro and duct tape, and yeah, you obviously need to cut the pieces yourself, but it's very practical. All right, good stuff. So let's talk about cameras, right? There are like two main things that you kind of need to think about if you're going down the HDMI route. If you're just going to stream locally and just going to attach USB cameras, like these two doesn't matter, because if you buy a USB camera, the feed will always be clean. USB cameras are always powered by the computer, so you don't need to worry about powering the camera. But after that, there are a bunch of requirements that comes with it, right? So you want to be able to have the camera can do 60 FPS. FPS stands for frames per second. And also know that 60 FPS is not the same as 60 hertz. So you need to be able to make sure that the camera can actually do truly 60 frames per second, right? And you want to do that at least for the play field, because otherwise you get really bad ball trails and you miss a lot of the action if you're only doing 30 FPS or less, which is more common, right? So you want to make sure that is the single most important aspect of the camera. You want to be able to mount the camera, so you want to have a 1/4 inch 20 thread. Otherwise, you will have to do something with the duct tape, zip ties, and Velcro. It gets really clunky really quickly. Optical zoom is very practical, because then you can kind of mount the camera wherever you want it, so it's out of the way, and you can use the zoom to get the framing right. Having a swivel screen on the camera, such as this one here, so you can kind of twist it and turn it again to get the framing right, where you're kind of standing and kind of adjusting the frame, whatnot. Stereo mic input is very practical, because then you can upgrade the mics, so you can buy like proper mics that do a really good job of like capturing the sound both for the game and the talent, and can put the mics where you need them, because if you just use the mic from the camera itself, you get a very hollow, kind of crispy sound. It's not very good, right? Having a cold shoe on the camera is also very good, because then you can mount accessories such as lights and mics and kind of get them. You kind of get like an extra mounting position from the camera without having extra clamps and magic arms and stuff. Filter threads is really good. On this particular camera here, I actually had a polarized filter. That is a little bit finicky to kind of work with, but having a filter thread means that you can put a protective glass in front of the lens, right? So then it becomes much easier to clean, and that is just like a standard photography trick, right? The good manual settings is sort of like that. It's kind of a little bit like if you want it to look very optimal in all your different conditions where you're capturing pinball, having the ability to set manual shutter speed to make sure that the camera doesn't try to compensate for bad light and therefore slow down the frames per second. You want to be able to set the shutter speed at 60 or more to make sure that you capture the action at the frame rate that you want, right? And being able to set manual exposure helps a lot as well, because pinball machines, they flash a lot, right? And sometimes you have lights out modes and whatnot. And if you have that set on automatic exposure, the camera might just find a very bright spot on the game, and that is kind of what it's going to focus on, right? And then you will see like the whole stream will just like fluctuate as however that light kind of behaves, right? And it kind of looks a little bit shitty, to be honest. And at the end of the day, like putting the exposure sort of like where it looks good for most of the time, that will be your gold standard, and that's where you want to set it. Exchangeable lenses is very practical as well, because you can use like wide angle lenses for your talent, and you can use better zoom lenses for your play feel and such, right? And having a large sensor is also very good, because then you capture better in low light situations. There's also other tricks to this, like this Panasonic here, it has like optimized low light capturing as well, right? So there's just like, you're just gonna have to read the spec and understand like where is this a good camera for what I use it for, like a scoreboard or a play field or the talent or something else. So more camera selection tips, like the play field is just, it has to be zoom capable, otherwise you're going to run into problems. Operable upside down with a swivel screen is good. The player, I usually run with a wide lens or a filter that you can kind of put in front of the camera, or run the camera in portrait mode, right? Because you want to capture some of the action behind the player, but you also want to capture the entire player. Including like the buttons and the lockdown bar and all that. You just don't want a face basically in the player camera. That's kind of what I'm saying. And again, capture good skin tones is very important to make sure that the player looks like an actual person. The score camera, I tend to kind of have the camera as far back as I can, right? Because then it allows you to capture EMs and early solid state games pretty easily. Because as you know, the score board and the score reels that are sort of like in one end of each end of the back box, right? Using manual exposure for LCD games is absolutely necessary, because yeah, this particular game, Jaws here, it kind of goes from super bright, super dark, super bright, super dark, like constantly, right? So having that manual exposure there is key to make it look good. Yeah, so the autofocus, it sort of depends on the situation a little bit, right? I mean, if you buy like one of the most expensive Sony cameras for your talent kind of camera, it's just like leave everything on auto and everything will look perfect. For the back box, using autofocus for the back box is sort of like, yeah, it's kind of practical, because you move your rig around and you move games and you don't have to worry about the focus of the length of the game and whatnot. But know this, that some cameras, when you have reflections, they will actually zoom in on the reflection in the back box than the actual content on the back box, right? And that makes it the camera kind of fighting for attention, right? Because it's sort of like when a player moves, like all of a sudden you will have focus on something else, right? And then it kind of tries to figure out where the actual sharpness in the image is, and yeah, it turns really messy. So it sort of like depends, right? The playfield usually, I mean, I run with autofocus on the playfield on all my setups, and it's just worked, right? It's just sometimes kind of when you stretch your hand in, all of a sudden it finds the hand and just like, oh, I'm going to focus on that now, and it doesn't focus back, right? So that's just something to think about if you're thinking about autofocus and such, right? So just make sure everything kind of goes back into focus. So let's talk a little bit about audio sources, and a few rules that I abide by. It's just like, you want to use the mics close to the source. Think about the Slayer concert. Just like you can see here, I have my back box mic like dead on this is basically like half an inch from the speaker, and that's where I pick up the sound from the game. You can do direct capture, some games have it. You can buy like a pin sound board and kind of do the whole kind of line out, and as well, that then you don't have to think about that, but you also want to be able to capture the player's voice, and you kind of want to use the correct type of mic for that. I don't want to have a mic in my face, so I have like shotgun mics, like maybe a foot from my face, that kind of captures most of the audio, but it leaks in a lot of other sound into that, so you kind of need to figure out a way to have the volume just right on the game, and and such, right? So, but it's a bit finicky to get it right. But at the end of the day, the closer the mics are to the source, the easier it gets. Yeah, some other thing, another kind of hint that I have there around the audio sources is that you need to be able to like capture one source, right? And what one source means in this, and that is just a point I wanted to make, is that if you have like a mic coming in from one camera, and then you have a USB audio interface where you have your Talon camera. What's going to happen when you mix all that up in your software on your laptop, like in OBS or whatever, is that they're going to be out of sync, right? So you will have like a echo effect, and it won't sound very good, right? So once you figure out how you want to capture your game, you just and your talent, is that they need to come in on one audio source into the software to avoid these syncing issues. And we can argue ourselves blue in the face that you can kind of compensate for that in OBS and in some other software. But trust me, you can make that absolutely perfect. Unplug those USB mics, plug them back in again, and see the results. And it won't be the same. I can promise you that, because I've spent more time on that than I've actually spent streaming. So just don't go there. That's my hardest tip. A few of the propeller hat accessories that I've kind of gathered over like the years is that I have like a noise gate, I have compressors, I have equalizers, I have like professional grade broadcast preamps and stuff like that, and it certainly helps because it gives you more knobs to twist when you want to make it sound a certain way. This is something that I started doing recently, so it's and I'm not quite there yet, but it's really fun to play around with. Making sure that you cancel out all your echoes in your environment. It's also very practical because then you don't have to deal with like flipper coils firing and they're echoing. That sounds really bad, right? So I spent a lot of time and effort to kind of build a echo cancellation surface in my ceiling in my arcade, and that is just a night and day difference, to be honest, right? And again, think about Tom Araya, the live music stage setup. The closer to that you get, the better your stream is going to sound. There are great software options out there as well. Just want to give a shout out to Rode. They make a lot of good software mixers that comes with a lot of the effects that you need, like noise gate, compressor, equalizers and stuff. So you can kind of get a very lean setup. You just buy their like USB mics that have integration with their software, and you basically can compress an entire rack of gear into a little software console on your laptop, which is pretty convenient. So let's start talking about the art and science of video capture. I'm already over time here a little bit, so I need to speed this up. If you have a bunch of USB cams, they will always be out of sync. There's very compute intensive. Settings are hard to work with, and you want to be able to capture in quadruplets, right? And I just want to talk a little bit about this thing first, right? And this is essentially the raw bandwidth that you need to capture a particular camera. So say that you have a full HD camera, that's 3 gigabits per second, and uncompressed. And if you have 3 of those, you need to be able to, the internal bandwidth of your of your computer need to be able to process almost 10 gigs per second, 10 gigabits per second of data without dropping frames, right? And as you approach 4K, this becomes really expensive and taxing. So you are in the domains of almost 40 gigabits per second when you're doing 4K cameras at 60 frames per second. So what most folks do today, they kind of capture cameras in quadruplets because there are many great brands out there for quad capture cards. And if you're using a laptop, you would be able to use this in a in an external PCIe enclosure. And that allows you to have 4 cameras. If they're all similar type, they will all be in sync, and it will get and there's no stuttering, there's no auto sync issues. It's a very great solution to capture cameras, right? And if you're doing this remotely, you can put wireless cameras in front of it using the type of devices that allows you to put a Wi-Fi HDMI signal on a network, essentially. Something that I've started dabbling is multi-viewers, and trying to kind of explain what this does is that you basically have a little box that takes 4 inputs is the most common one, right? And it basically puts the different inputs on a grid, right? And you can configure the grid how you want the grid, and you basically capture the output signal from this. And what happens here is that you only get one input that you need to deal with in OBS, right? Or in some other capture software. And like in my case here, I have a 4K multi-viewer. I put my 4 cameras in the quad view here, and all of a sudden I have 4 full HD cameras coming in one kind of in one big swath, right? So, and that allows me to just like chop this up in OBS and put it where it needs to be, rotate it, scale it, and stuff like that, and everything is in perfect sync, right? And that is one of the benefits of this, right? So that everything comes in on one wire. You have sound and you have video, and you only have to capture one signal. And that is a very lean solution versus using multiple full HD streams and such. Another popular method that I see more and more now is cameras using something called NDI and RTSP, and that means that the camera is basically, you attach the camera to a network, and you will then have compression and stuff like that at the edge, so to speak, right? So you get a very bandwidth lean signal coming into your software, and it goes it travels over traditional networks, right? So in this particular setup here, I have my multi-viewer that goes into an NDI encoder, and then again just puts that on a regular Wi-Fi network. So at my broadcast station, I'm capturing that signal into OBS, and it all comes in a quad view. And I also have a solution where you can, where I can set different quality and different frame rates and frame sizes and stuff, depending on what I'm actually capturing at the rig. If I'm capturing the quad, if I'm just capturing the back box or the player, I configure different settings on the encoder and the multi-viewer to make sure that I get the optimal use of the bandwidth that comes across the network. Yeah, it's a little bit. This is a propeller hat kind of thing as well, to be honest. And I'm just going to glance over here. If you want to use direct capture from your sterns, I know a lot of people like doing that. This is the board that you need. This is the link to the board. It's very unreliable. So if you have one game, I recommend you buy a 3-pack of these, because one of them will die after an hour. And never to be seen again. One of them will be glitchy. Either it goes offline entirely, you need to power cycle the game to bring it back up, and the third one will work absolutely perfectly, right? So that's my experience from them. And if you have a Jersey Jack, American Pinball, or a spooky game, it's just like you use a DVI or HDMI splitter depending on the game, and you will be good to go to get that signal straight into OBS, and it looks absolutely perfect. Looking at the computing hardware, like, are you going to use a laptop or a PC? So if you go down the PC route, you have to pick a computer that has an NVIDIA hardware. There's absolutely no excuse using anything else at this point in time. They have a built-in video encoder. It's called NVEnc, and it's very efficient, and it runs entirely on the GPU, so your computer is completely offloaded from anything from the CPU, and you can use the CPU for other things, and it just looks great. And it is the absolute gold standard in video encoding out there. And if you're going down the laptop route, I would advise you to get a laptop that accepts USB PD, because then you can use external power banks and stuff like that to power the laptop if you kind of want to strap it into the rig like I've done. And that means that the laptop cannot consume more than like 100 or up to 140 watts. You can get power banks doing now, right? So that's just something to think about. If you go buy a desktop, they have PCIe slots. You just get a quad capture card and you're good to go. The MacBook route is just like, yes, I did, but I kind of advise people don't, because you get a lot of restrictions and limitations. Like running OBS with a 4K canvas is super taxing. You can't do it. If you get a MacBook, if you get if you get an Ultra Studio, which is the desktop version, maybe you would be able to do it, but and the main thing here is that you won't be able to render the frame in time, right? So what happens is that you kind of go beyond 16.67 milliseconds to render the frame, and all of a sudden you have you also have, and what happens there is that your frame rate will drop, right? And there's also problems with like if you're using a lot of scale filtering, and what else is taxing? Yeah, there's a bunch of different things that are really taxing, and then you, and in turn you overload the encoder, and that will also lead to problems, right? And there is something called like Apple VT. I'm going to talk about that later, which allows you to use the actual Apple hardware to encode video, but it's not very good at low bit rates. So there's, again, just run with a PC. That's your highest rate of success for sure. All right, so I got the first part down to 36 minutes. And I should have had 15 minutes left here, but I have 15 minutes left, but I'm down to, I was supposed to have 25 minutes. So let's see if I can cram it in here. Okay, so OBS Crash Course. This is kind of just a screenshot of what my OBS looks like at the moment. And we just have the program here. This is what being broadcasted. It's also called the preview or the canvas. And that is kind of like, this is what is actually going out into onto Twitch or YouTube or whatever you're streaming from. And then you have your scenes, and the scenes is basically what you see in the program, right? You select the scene and that will go into the program. And in the scene you have something called sources, and a source can basically be anything under the sun that is digital, more or less, right? It's your audio capture, it's your video capture, it's your images that you put in the stream. It could be a video file, it could be a web browser visiting a website to grab some information to incorporate into the stream, and it can also be other scenes, and that is a very hot tip that the sooner you kind of understand and figure out OBS and how you nest scenes, the easier it will become to work with, right? Because then you don't need to have as many like different sources in each individual scene. You just build like in this instance here, you just like put all your branding stuff. You kind of put that in a scene, and you can incorporate that everywhere. And the same thing, like the cameras in this case, I just have those in separate scenes, cropped where I want them, and I can then build different scenes with the cameras. The audio mixer allows you to kind of select with audio sources or in the scene, pretty basic stuff. These are the output controls. It's like start streaming, stop streaming, start recording, and your replay buffer. You can also create something called a virtual camera, so you can kind of broadcast this over a Zoom call if that's what you want to do, and stuff like that, right? And it's also, we're not going to talk about the studio mode, but that's more like if you're kind of running a multi-man shop and doing a lot of stuff kind of behind the scenes while you're running the stream. Running studio mode allows you to kind of like do things with your sources and scenes while the program is running. This is where your Twitch controls are. Like if you need to clip something, you want to raid, you want to edit your stream information and stuff like that. All that you can find here, and it's also customizable depending on which of these elements are important to you. The stats are available as a menu item in OBS. This is not up by default. I usually detach that menu and or that window and attach it and dock it into the main view, so to speak, right? Because then you can see your the average time to render a frame, and you can see your encoding, your bandwidth, like everything pertinent to the performance of the stream will be able to just be at a glance part of OBS. It's very practical. And something kind of need to be said a little bit about the different layouts for pinball streaming. I'm not going to touch so much about it, but kind of my philosophy of like how you place different things in the stream is that I have the player on the left side looking into the stream, right? So I'm looking down at the playfield. I'm looking towards the scoreboard, right? I see too many streams where I see the player is kind of tucked up in this end here, looking outwards. The playfield is behind him, and the score is like up in some corner somewhere, and it just gets really it doesn't look very good from a flow perspective, right? And I try to kind of say that in a good way without kind of stomping on people's toes, because there are a lot of streams where players, they're just looking out somewhere else, and the playfield can be like 3 grids over, right? And it doesn't really look very good in my opinion. So yeah, the last thing here is like the profile and scene collection. That's also something really good. If the faster you learn about how to manage different profile and scene collections, that allows you to kind of have different settings for different things that you do, right? So I stream arcade games sometimes, and then that means I have one scene collection for arcade and one for pinball. I have sometimes I do stuff in 4K to just like do recording of something, whatever. Then I have a 4K profile, and like that's yeah, it's very handy, right? And where you can have use the same OBS instance to kind of categorize your different scenes and sources and all the settings. So let's talk about encoding audio and video, right? So I just kind of threw up the traditional frame sizes that we have available. This is the most common ones here, and kind of like the size of it. And at the end of the day, we're talking about, we want to be able to compress, like you saw, there was a 3 gigabit per second uncompressed video bandwidth, right? And at the end of the day, if we want to be able to compress that as efficient as possible and put it on the wire, right? And if you use an hardware GPU video encoding, that will offload the CPU, and PG&E are very happy because they're very power hungry, and it will breeze through like all the scaling and all the filtering that you put in your scene with your different elements, and it will just look absolutely fantastic. As I mentioned, NVIDIA NVENC is the gold standard. Intel and AMD, they are sort of like in the wake water, fighting each other, like how to get better at video encoding. There is a new standard that's being worked on. The streaming platforms are not supporting it fully yet. It's called AV1, and it's supposed to look better and be more efficient. And we'll see when the day comes when. Because it's a matter of like, all right, so will NVIDIA support it, and will it be well supported on NVIDIA? Then everybody's going to jump the water, and it's also like the streaming platforms also need to support it, of course, and like all the browsers and all the viewers and all that, right? So we'll see where it ends up. The Apple VT encoder is like, it's not very good at low bit rates, as I mentioned, right? But if you're doing lossless and post-production, where you basically shoot everything to YouTube, then it's a great encoder, but not for for low bit rates, and that's kind of where you get into software and using the CPU to do video encoding. It looks great, the X264, and it's very well vetted. It's an open standard, and it's a lot of people contributing to it, so it looks great, and it works really good as well, right? But it burns a lot of CPU cycles. Scaling and filtering is very expensive, and that kind of can lead to stuttering and other kind of rendering artifacts if it doesn't have enough capacity to run it, right? And this is what I run on my Mac primarily, because it's really efficient at low bit rates. Works really good. There's different profile you can apply and such, and that will do a phenomenal job putting the streaming. It will do a phenomenal job compressing your video, putting it on the wire, and making the stream look really good for your viewers. And the audio is just like, I just keep it above 160 kilobits per second, and just make sure that the audio doesn't peak. You kind of want to have it in the yellows in OBS, if you're using OBS. If it dips into the reds, it's fine. Just make sure it doesn't peak, because when you peak, the whole kind of column turns red, and it sounds really horrible for your viewers. So now we're going to talk about when the internet was founded. Not sure about that. That was just a joke. Please laugh. The ideal bandwidth for 1080p is 12 megabits per second, and I'm kind of going to break that down a little bit. And the Twitch bitrate is 6,000 kilobits per second. If you're a Twitch partner, I sort of think you can do 8,000 kilobits per second. I've read that somewhere. I'm not confirmed it, but that means also that like your viewers needs to be able to consume at 8,000 kilobits per second as well. So it's kind of taxing both ways. And if you have less bandwidth than this, you kind of need to scale back quality. And yeah, so I mean, just to explain, like, well, okay, so why do you need 12 megabits per second when the bitrate is only 6,000? And it's just like, you need the headroom, right? Because you have peaks, you have other things connecting. If your friend is sitting there with his little iPhone and taking pictures on your Wi-Fi, it's going to sync up to iCloud, like, and that will just create dips in the connection, right? So if you're absolutely alone on the wire, then you might only need 8 megabits per second upload, right? Or maybe 7 megabits. I don't know. I mean, but it's just really, you don't want to have very tight margins, right? You want to have lofty margins. So if you want to scale back the quality, the frame rate is the one that allows you to do the most, and then you can scale down the canvas second. Some people will argue the other way around, that you absolutely need 60 frames per second, and you do the canvas first, but that won't give you as much bandwidth back, right? So that's kind of depending on what you're playing with, right? So and this is kind of the absolutely lowest. Like, so if you can't produce a stream with 2500 kilobits per second, just like walk away and say this won't work, right? Because it's gonna waste your time, basically. You can measure the bandwidth on fast.com and speedtest.net. And if you want to troubleshoot your streaming, there is a tool that is provided by Twitch. It's called inspector.twitch.tv. And OBS also has this very practical test mode where you kind of configure it in the streaming settings. You put it in test mode. You start your stream and you visit inspector.twitch.tv, and you can basically click on your stream that is currently running, and you will see here the dotted line is the frame rate, 60 frames per second. Yes, looks good. And then you have the solid blue line here is the encoding bitrate, right? And this is normally what it would look like. I think this was just run for a couple of minutes to get us on demo information, but that is a really good tool to understand if your connectivity is good in your house or in your arcade or the venue you're going to stream from. All right, so how do you get your machines out on the internet? And Twitch et al. Is, I mean, there are so many like live streaming platforms out there, but at the end of the day, you as a producer, you don't have to worry that much about like being compatible or whatnot, because they all use the same protocol. It's called RTMP, it's real-time messaging protocol. Can do audio, video, and text, and a bunch of other things that you can put on into a streaming format, and like all the different platforms out there support it, right? And if you want to do kind of like vertical streaming, I've seen a couple of folks doing that. Then you want to do TikTok or Instagram, and and pinball is actually pretty well suited for that, right? Given the format. Twitch has a pinball category. That's very practical to know, because you kind of want to follow that category and kind of socialize with the people on there to drive awareness, right? So when you're streaming that category, other kind of pinball enthusiasts can then they browse that category and see that you're online, basically. I've seen some creators are starting to do multi-streaming. I've kind of tested it out. It wasn't for me. I couldn't quite live with having to manage like 4 different kind of outlets for the content, and it's just I'm going to focus on Twitch moving forward, and it's just simpler. And if you're doing pre-recorded content, you should probably focus on YouTube, because that's what I've seen. Like most content creators out there that do pinball, they want to do pre-recorded stuff. They want to do it in 4K. They want to make it like look really good and well produced. And that is absolutely fine as well, because if you want to like put together a really well crafted kind of tutorial, that is really difficult to do live, because it's pinball, right? You never know what happens. You might get 3 house balls and all right, that was the tutorial, right? It doesn't work, right? And that's kind of where you need to pre-record everything and kind of sit and edit your video for days on end, and then you upload it to YouTube. And uploading a 4K video like 15 minutes to YouTube, it will take 2 days for it to render and be published, right? So it's not really for me. I only do live broadcasts, do some recording, but not a lot. So when you go to the Twitch category, this is the sad kind of not sad, but I mean, this is the reality, right? So the pinball category, like if you kind of compare it to people playing like Call of Duty or like Elden Ring or like Fortnite, whatever, where you have 123,000 viewers there, I think it says, right? Like pinball, this is just a regular Saturday, right? On Twitch for pinball streaming, right? There's a tournament running. I can see that there's at least one named player that I know of, like Sanjay Shah, is in this tournament, and that obviously means that there's a lot of viewers, right? So they have like 101 viewers right now at this point in time, and there's another tournament running here with 24 viewers and 11 viewers. Like, so these are the top 3, and then we go to the next page, and here you will see all the single digits people, 5 viewers, 2 viewers, right? And that is the harsh reality, right? At the end of the day, like, I don't want to say this to be discouraging, but this is the reality, right? You could be streaming pinball by yourself for hours. That is just how it is, because there's usually a tournament running somewhere that somebody wants to watch, and that draws the biggest audience. That's just the reality. So now we're sitting there with our 2 viewers. So how do we actually boost the production value to get the people to tune in? And we do not have a Super Bowl budget, so that's that's for sure. But like, how do we kind of make a little tweaks to make it look a little bit better, and kind of add some interaction with the viewers and such? And this is kind of what the next few slides will show you, right? So creator tools, I've kind of categorized into a bunch of different buckets here. Like so Streamlabs and Stream Elements, they allow you to integrate a lot of cool stuff into your streams, right? So there's like there's the chat component, so you can render a chat like cross-platform into your stream. So that means that interaction will kind of spike, because people's kind of chat messages will become part of the actual broadcast, right? So your emotes and everything there gets rendered in the chat. There's also notifications that you can put in, like alert boxes. So like when somebody follows and somebody subscribes, you can have an animation and a sound effect come up, and that will also like spark more interaction with your viewers. And Streamlabs and Stream Elements, they're sort of similar in that. They also provide a bunch of other really helpful things like rendering overlays, thumbnails, and a bunch of other things, right? So it's familiarize yourself with one or the other, because you're gonna need it if you want to be able to drive like online interaction with your audience. Match play, I mentioned here as well. It's match play has like a broadcast view. Where you basically, as a stream producer, it's a view just for the stream producer. So you kind of need to kind of tap your tournament director, and he has to send you the link to the broadcast view, so you can paste that URL either into OBS directly, or if you have a separate browser that you capture on your desktop, right? And that will get like all the match information, like the round info, the game info, all the current standings and the players in that match, right? So if you're using DTM, the Drains Tournament Manager, it has a similar interface, and you have to kind of tap your tournament director there as well to kind of get the links for those panels. Scorebit is something else that I've incorporated. I have scorebits in most of my games. Sometimes I kind of bring in the overlay, and sometimes I don't. It kind of depends on what mood I'm in, but that allows you to kind of add another element of interaction with your with the stream, right? So you have your live scores. It lags a little bit, but you will get your the game name, and you can put some icons like your player profiles and stuff in there. On DMD era games, it also tracks the progress, which is pretty cool. So that's definitely something for you to check out if you want to kind of create more value for your stream. And being really handy with the like switching scenes and stuff like that, I think that kind of helps boost the production value somewhat, right? So you can kind of like toggle certain elements in your chat. You can switch scenes, like for instance, I have like a foot pedal, so I can switch scenes. Like, so when I'm playing a pinball machine that has like a video mode, I can switch to my video mode scene, right? So like when I'm playing Scream on Venom, for instance, I run the video mode in full screen in the stream, right, with a little picture of me in the corner, and once the gameplay is back, I can just like hit the pedal, and I'll be back to the full pinball scene, right? And I think that could drive a lot of the production value as well, right? And just being really clever, and like I have on this particular stream deck here, I have like it will cut. The instant replays and stuff like that. I don't do instant replays when I kind of stream myself, but during tournament streams, it's really good for providing additional commentary on a particular move, or something happened that you kind of want to go over again, and you take that instant replay, you slow it down, and you can show it to the audience again, which is pretty, that again adds to the production value. I hang out a lot on the social media, and I kind of just post highlights. I post things that are upcoming, and just like constantly just hammer and try to kind of get yourself more relevant in this space, right? But it's a really crowded space. Let's just put it that way. But being alive on social media kind of helps drive interaction somewhat. So I'm going to summarize this here. Yeah, I ran a couple of minutes over here. I still need to cut it down. But at the end of the day, the 6P rule, don't forget this. Prior planning prevents piss poor performance. Run test streams, measure bandwidth. Make sure everything looks good, like record locally, scrutinize it, ask your friends for advice, or like just opinions. What does it look like? Does it sound okay? And stuff like that before you hit that go live go live button. Yeah, that was the testing. And also like the whole spending thing, right? I mean, a lot of people probably wonders just like, how much does this cost, right? And this could this could be like really cheap, but it could be as expensive as you want it, right? The sky is the limit here. If you go into like professional broadcasting equipment, we're talking millions of dollars, right? But at the end of the day, we're talking consumer stuff here, right? A couple of grand will get you off the ground, and if you want to do like a full kind of tournament setup, you're probably looking at a bit north of 10 grand, right? But at the end of the day, you need to figure out all the details that matters to you first, and then spend the money, right? Because there's no point you buy a 5 grand camera when that will be scaled down to a thumbnail in a 1080p stream, right? It just doesn't make any sense, right? And remember the Slayer photo in the beginning, do the part, like have that in the back of your head. We're doing like a full live stage rock concert in this pinball stream, and the better you set up for that scenario, the better success you will have. And I mentioned it in the beginning, it's just like discuss tech with the other pinball streamers. We are actually quite helpful. We're helping each other to kind of figure out like, yeah, this is not working. I bought one of these. What do you think? Like that's that kind of discussion, right? And some people, they post their streams there and ask for advice and stuff like that. So that's definitely something for you to check out. And first and foremost, just have fun with it. I'm only doing this for fun. This is not going to pay the bills anytime soon. So hope you, I would just wish you good luck and have fun. And this is the QA portion. I'm 10 minutes over. But if you want equipment ideas, all my gear that I'm using, you can find at dri374.live/gear. And this will be the QA section, and hopefully I can run over 10 minutes on the seminar. Who knows? Anyhow, it was fun presenting this again to kind of run through the material, and hope to see you live in Lodi.